My God, Mark, you are here. I'm just gonna get rid of these note takers who shouldn't be here anymore. Uh, all these automatic things. Did you see our Americans friends trips? Last night before I went to bed, I just thought I'd be polite to Deanie and just check on her because assuming everything's fine, they were still traveling. You're muted. Still muted.
Yeah, they had a layover in Amsterdam.
Yeah, and in America somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's the way of travel, especially probably if you have to book it through, an academic source. They will find ways to find the most inconvenient travel possible.
Well, when I went to Washington State, it was by some Canadian city. It wasn't so bad, but yeah, that was like a 24-hour trip. Hi, Carl. So I think Fabienne is joining us at least today,
Mhm.
going back to a bit normal. So Mark and I are going to have to do a little bit of a debrief about last week's Hypertext Conference, which will be interesting.
Well,
Um,
I managed to get Joey's laptop for him.
yeah, what was that all about? That sounds stressful.
Well, no, he he left. Sorry, this is for Carl. This is one of my colleagues left the conference the day before the rest of us, and then sent a message at night. Said a bit absent-minded, going through the security theatre. I took my laptop out. You had to put it into the tray, and it wasn't until we were somewhere, on through the process, I realised I did not have my laptop anymore. So he said, "Could you try and pick it up when you go through the airport?" The fun was that it was Saturday by that point, so the luggage office is closed. So I wandered over to the information desk and did my best. I'm terribly sorry, I'm a sort of academic. I don't really understand how everything works, and they rapidly realized, "Oh, I'm dealing with a complete simpleton. I better do something." And bless them, they managed to track it down, and everyone was very nice. So I'm giving Joey his laptop back tomorrow.
Very good. Andrew, I don't know how to tell you this, but I think drugs are illegal. I can't understand any other way you could be awake right now, so it's got to be that. What in the
Yeah,
world?
I passed out way too early. So I'm awake now.
How long was
Great.
your trip? I texted Deanie just one of those hope everything's fine texts and hope expecting her to be home. But no, you were in some Minneapolis or something crazy?
Yeah, we had another layover. We got back in the States at like 5 p.m. So actually not that bad. But because we were chasing the sun, it would have been like a lot longer for us than the passage of time. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's yeah. No, it was epic to see you last week. Hi, Chris. So
Hello.
some of us are just back from the Hypertext Conference. We'll do a brief debrief. Fabienne is joining us. He's running to some computer somewhere. And then we can go back to more general future of text discussions, but also today would be really good to nail down a couple of topics so we can invite people into to topics. Let me just go through my to-do list to see what I've written. There's too many to-do items that haven't been done. So that's Fabienne. Oh, there's Fabienne.
Hej då, hej då.
Just turning on my do not disturb because I got disturbed. Right, okay, so yeah, brief update of last week. It was, I hope Mark is still kind of here. I know we're being recorded. I know I'm here with people who were there, but okay, first of all, Fabian, we were wondering whether you should attend. We talked about that a little bit. For me, I'm really, really sad you weren't there. It would have made it much more enjoyable for me. However, I don't think it would have been very productive. So I think a lot of it would have been you and me in a coffee shop because as I'm sure Mark would agree, the conference has changed a lot since the late 80s. It started out very much as here's a hypertext system, what do you guys think? And now it's gone into much more academic rigor, much more philosophy, much more measurements, lots of that stuff, which is all great. There was a lot of inspirations where we didn't even expect them. But as we brought up some of us brought up in the last kind of town hall meeting, going to the future, it would be nice if there was a more official way to show work. So if someone produces a system, really sell it, be enthusiastic and happy, and just, this is what I do, I think you should join me. As long as at the end of that presentation, there's a few minutes of how it interoperates with other systems. That was kind of my big thing. So, Mark, how about your perspectives of last week? Or Andrew, whoever's awake enough.
Well, I thought it was very interesting.
Hang on, sorry, Mark. Sorry. Just to make it really clear, our actual demo went really, really well. Sorry, that was just such a big positive thing. I even forgot to mention it. So let's talk about that in a minute. And then, Mark, I apologize for cutting you off just as you started.
No, it's fine. I mean, I was thinking on your last point. I mean, I think the difficult thing is academic conference is just that. So it's a place to sort of show things. But back when they were showing things as you described, it was because it was amazing that something had been built at all. As opposed to we're now building essentially apps or experiences on a fairly mature platform. So I think it's slightly different because the conference isn't essentially a sales with a very small S space. So it's difficult. But I mean, the location is there. What is difficult to do is, of course, the main point of the whole process is for people basically to present their papers. And actually, with a number of papers, that fills up the time available. So in the opportunity to show things with everyone present is actually quite limited. So it tends to be the sort of dog watch at the end of the day. But there's always the opportunity to sort of show and be available. But I think that the sort of space that the event you're after is hard to do at an academic conference. I don't think it will ever quite be that. It will be better to show it more at some kind of more of a commercial thing, I think, simply because it's just not set up for a pitch. Plus the fact that if you do present it in that way, people will be looking at the way the tool is built rather than how it works. So you'll end up down a different rabbit hole. I don't see a way out of that. I don't think it's no reflection on what's being presented, but that's just the way of things. Conference itself, extremely interesting. Really nice this year. It's a larger presentation of people from the digital humanities, which is nice because it helps leaven out what can otherwise be lumps of technology. It's always a bit of swings and roundabouts. It was very interesting that next year's chair is his field is recommender systems. So we'll see how that works out. Though the core of hypertext is closer to being something about a reflection on method or even philosophy than it is nuts and bolts of how you go code stuff. That's not really where the interest is. Hypertext has always been about the links and non-linearity, and in that it remains strong. What it has done is it's blistered off multiple conferences. The web conference really started at Hypertext. Some of the social network conferences came out of Hypertext. Some of the user experiences came out of Hypertext. Web science came out of Hypertext, essentially. So it keeps blistering off all these things that are new and exciting, and it stays sort of clear of its purpose at looking ahead and really thinking through the nuts and bolts of information. So yeah, good fun.
Just as a little comment on that, I agree with obviously most of what Mark said, but I am a little disappointed that there isn't more, here's a system, let's talk about it, because to me it becomes quite abstract. It becomes very much about the formatting of the academic paper, something both Mark and I have tried to improve, because I've spent more time formatting my paper than I did writing it. And I am not the only one, as they say. And also, in terms of platform, there aren't really platforms. There is the web, of course, as one platform. But whatever, I may disagree with the format of the symposium. Mark is obviously right that this is how it is now. So I can't see putting in quite as much effort in the future because, I spent all this time on my own software author and visual meta and all of that, do a presentation, get a nice little round of applause. I sent the link here, and then next. There isn't an opportunity for a deep dialogue on why are you doing it this way? Couldn't we do it that way? And, what about this and so on? There was a lot of presentations on, Mark has a thing.
Well, just a quick one on that. I mean, there is a scope there. It's partly about perception and how it's presented. One of the things that was useful, which came out of some sort of talk late one night at some conferences, that I think a better way to sell visual meta is as a thing on its own. The really useful move forward that comes out of that idea is just a document providing effectively seeding the provenance chain by stating unambiguously and in fairly plain text what it is. The fact that the same essentially metaphor, the same method can be used for wider things probably is actually obscuring what it does. So one of the things that's probably unintentionally worked against its start is the fact that it can do more things, and the fact that Fred has very much built it into the heart of his own tools is perhaps a confusion to people who don't know his tools and don't really know or understand the wider picture. So a better way going forward might be to push, just gently sort of give airtime, as it were, to visual meta as a very small and clinical thing. The rest follow from it, because if the visual meta construct is understood and implemented, then all the other things can flow from it. The hardest part is to get people to say, what's the point? Why is it there? Yeah. And it's easier. What I took away from the discussion a few days ago is it is easier to understand if it is less rather than more.
Yeah, no, I agree on the specific on my thing there. Yes, I completely agree with you. But what I would really like to see is workshop on someone's built this tool. Let's talk about it. But also connections, and that's where visual meta could fight, so to speak, against other means and so on. But anyway, that doesn't seem to be the way it is now. There is much more. I mean, you can all see the proceedings. What kind of thing. So it's worthwhile, but yeah. Anyway, that's what I have. Other than to say the demo went extremely well, our XR demo. Andrew, do you want to mention a few words on your brilliant presentation?
I'll see if my brain can put a coherent thought together. Yeah, it went really well. We had we did a 2 or 3 minute live demo while Dini and Frode talked, and we had it up on a big projector screen. Caught enough people's interests that then once we broke into our demo stations, Frode had one outside, and then I had one inside the main room. We got quite a good amount of people actually coming through and trying it. I don't think there was much downtime. And then we did get some useful feedback. From my station particularly, people often mentioned the font was too small. They wished it was bigger. Now the small font looks nice. And I think the reason why I was getting those complaints and not so much Frode was because he was in the Vision and I was in the Quest. The resolution is better in the Vision. So we can decide how we want to approach that. If we want to just say, well, Vision's our intended device, so don't worry about it. Or if we want to say, well, we want to have it acceptable for Quest as well, and maybe have like a setting to change the audio, the text size. We can look into that.
So my immediate reaction to this is, and I'm relatively young and I have relatively fine vision, and yet just today I used the Control Mouth Wheel shortcut a couple of times already, like to see different terminals in different fonts. So my initial knee-jerk reaction is yes, absolutely a setting for this, because also there are, as you say, different headsets, but also different ages, different. Even like you said, you're a bit tired, I guess, from the trip back. Maybe you would also prefer like just bigger font for even this morning. So yeah, I bet on this being a rather safe feature that a lot of people would need. And indeed, like even if it's to say, okay, the headset kind of sucks on 2024, but we can bet in 2026, 2030, whatever, then you could have tiny font. But yeah, sorry, that's my rule.
That's good. That's good. I do think adding a font change setting would be great. We have a little caveat, and that is we can't change the font live. So it would have to be like a setting that you change, and then all future generated font is larger. That's just where we're at the moment. So that would mean essentially you'd pick a font size on the browser, and then when you enter, all the font would be bigger. I'm trying to think if there's a way to change that. Not with the current setup, but we could refactor some stuff. I want to kind of refactor the save system anyways because it's become non-functional since some of the updates a while back. So maybe I could save the state, wipe the scene, make the font larger, and reload the state. Maybe. I don't know. We could look into it.
The point that Mark is pointing there is very similar to my feedback. It doesn't take long before the screen is completely filled with stuff. So I really think we need to revisit how to keep it tidy with the foreground, background, midground thing that we've had on and off. I'm demoing this to Alan Kay in a couple of weeks, and I think that might be a good deadline for us to really sort out the fine visual details, like why is the abstract so huge? I know why. I mean, that's how I designed it. But now is the time to revisit that and not just be whatever was in Keynote. So yeah, that kind of thing. So it was interesting to learn that even in an infinite space, you got to be careful with the space. Fabian?
Yeah, one of the things that happens also very often to me when I do demo with people of different level of expertise, and honestly with things that are experimental anyway, is like a reset button that the user itself can trigger relatively easily, not by mistake, so something in the back, but something that they can do without even my control. Like they're in power, but at some point, because they don't know what they're doing, which is fair, again, it's experimental, but knowing there is like, I can go crazy and I can get back to a safe, let's say, state, and without removing the headset, without anything like too complicated, that helped me a ton of times in the past.
Yeah, we have that. We got it pushed right before the demo, like 2 weeks before. Yeah, so it's one of the mana menu options.
But it sounds like it was not sufficient if it became too crowded, like if people did not use it, I guess.
I think it's because people didn't care to be in the demo long enough. They would like make a space and be like, okay, I'm done now.
Yeah, we didn't
That's usually
encourage
how it is
them.
with demos.
We didn't encourage them being in there so long, and also I did not encourage them to use that hand menu. I was very proud to show it off, but because the commands are just like that, they're a bit more kind of admin like that, move hand and things. They're not all view and stuff. That wasn't encouraged, but yeah, I look forward to Wednesdays where we can do some more tweaking of the design, put it on and look at it because yeah, it's nice, but yeah, got to keep going. Mark, then Fabian.
Yes, just a quick observation, and not something by which I think I have an answer, but just listening to the discussion in the sense of the untidiness. Of course, the challenge is to work out what is untidiness / overload due to design and what is deliberate untidiness caused by the person using it. In other words, if you're trying to tear something apart, you may want to put things all over the place. And it's a challenge to which I don't know the answer. It's the difference in, there's the mess I made, and in a sense, the mess that somebody else made. The mess I made, I understand because I made that mess. Short of just wanting a sort of like a do-over, such as was mentioned by Fabian, and I understand it's implemented in the system. So in terms of redesigning things to make things easier, I see that as a sort of genuine challenge for those making it, and indeed for Andrew sort of coding it, because it's a fine line between the two. Anyway, I'll offer that for what it's worth. Thanks.
Yeah, it makes sense. At least the design shouldn't get in the way. But yeah, Fabian.
Yeah, briefly also, I think one trick that helped me in the past is to, which again, I don't know if you had done as I wasn't there, but is to give the person a screen capture or anything that they've done, not necessarily because they need it, but also as a prompt, like, oh, you might not have tried everything, you might ponder like in the train or on the airplane back, but you still got a thing. It's also not like, oh, it's a demo as if you were going to, I don't know, the amusement park or something. It's like, we're building a tool to help you to think. Not everything is feasible right now. You might not have the hardware, but here is a safe state. Again, it's kind of, it's tricky because it's not actually the state, unless that's doable, which is even better. But even if it's not doable, let's say at the JSON or whatnot, to have a screen capture what they have accomplished so far. And even if it's like, it sounds artistic rather than like, oh, they put a lot of thought, again, it helps to project. So that, I don't know if you've done that, but otherwise I would suggest to consider it for next time.
Hi, Brandel. Peter, just one quick second. So, Brandel, we talked a little bit about the conference. It was interesting. The demo went really, really well of the XR software. One of the issues we're talking about now that came up was it can get a bit overwhelming, too much stuff. So that's the topic du jour. Peter.
I was wondering, would it be theoretically possible to have the demo send an email out to the demo user's account and to be able to have someone email Visual Meta in to a mailbox that could be accessed by the demo, so you could enter the demo and say, I'm 23, and then have it restore your state. And then at the end say, mail back where I was, so that you could come back and access that state. So you'd enter the demo and maybe you'd have a keypad and you hit 23, and then the state that you were in the demo at would be retrieved from the mailbox that the demo state had been sent to, and you'd be able to get, basically just want to have a way of getting data in and out of the demo so that state can be preserved across demo sessions.
That sounds cool in my mind, as in store all the data in a URL somehow, maybe, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anders thinking deep thoughts.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be an email, it'd be a database, but that's just picking at the nuance. I mean, it's currently not set up for that at all. But we've talked about refactoring the save system, so that could be worth looking into. You can't put all the data into the URL. It's too much. But we could totally save into a database and then load based off of a custom hash URL. That would be fine. I say that'd be fine. It's setting up the save and load system that would be a pain. But we've done it before, so we can do it again. It just would take a bit of work.
Let's see,
I would say email is like actually connecting to email is an interesting idea, sort of having an open loop with the notion of a database that people have the ability to kind of read and write from based on sort of permanent records. It's similar to we many years ago, God, nearly 20 years ago, we at my startup implemented a sort of a metaversey kind of like Second Life. And the connection socket mechanism that we used was internet relay chat. The benefit there being that in order to write a bot or any other action on it, one, we could just record the logs of, so in order to walk places, you would send IRC messages, and in order to undertake actions, you would, and so then they would also be intrinsically timestamped. They would be logged, and then you could either just write an IRC bot in whatever platform you wanted, or you could just save those logs and replay them via some kind of other IRC client. So a database, yes, it doesn't matter whether it's email or not, but email is an interesting way to open the pipe on that database management system. That is an interesting thing to consider. So that's all I will say.
Yeah, these as the system becomes more useful, we definitely need to look more into saving states and not having it be transient. Mark.
I just thought to mention, as Brandel was saying, the one who steered us towards having web compatible information, that one interesting thing we tripped over preparing the 2024 hypertext proceedings data for the demo at the conference was that because I couldn't get at the final form in the ACM library until it was sort of released on the day, I used the last version that was in their production process, which it turned out chose to use a different way to express one of the meta tags, which broke the parser. Not Andrew's fault at all. So you know, we got all the data and suddenly it all broke. So that was sort of fixed with an easy hack. But I mention this because it really just brings home the fact that if there isn't thought given by those essentially creating data for reuse into using, you know, and abiding by standards, all sorts of hilarity ensues. So
we've talked a lot about the XR project, and this is supposed to be normal Mondays again. Huh? I'm just going to paste something in here. In terms of themes going forward, I think we should have a few themed meetings. They seem to go quite well. The wider community shows up. I have 2 questions. What is linking and addressing in XR, and what is sharing? It's coming up because having this thing that Andrew has made now, we should probably give it a name. There can be things in there that you want to give to someone else. And we had a bit of a provocation at the event because it was an incredible building. It's like a German Harry Potter building. Yes, I know it was in Poland, but it was German architects apparently, and that's what it looks like. Cool, big building. So how would it be, let's say we go back to that building in 5 years and having a headset is normal. AR mode is normal for part of the time. What would it be like if every single surface in that building could be used for information? Right. So some of it would be used by the university to show things, whatever they show, posters. Some of it would be taken over for classes. Some of it would be used for ad hoc discussions. And some of it would be us walking around saying, now hang on a second, let me just plop this up on the side here. And then how does it relate to this poster that's next to it, if at all? And if someone puts up something really interesting, how do we give it to someone else in that group? These are our original questions, but being in that super cool building made it a bit come alive again in a sense. So that's what these questions here relate to specifically, and it's not just kind of theoretical. Fabien, yes.
So it's I hope a partial, maybe not answer, but jamming on this. First, I forgot what prompted it, but you know, it's a demo from a Japanese designer or programmer about using the looking glass, which is not sure how to say it, 3D-ish display-ish. So you can look at it, but only on the side. Basically, you get depth or a sensation of depth. I recommend to try it. The value of it, and why I mention it after what you say, Frode, is because you don't need a headset. And what the demo did is the person had a HoloLens 2, so an AR set of glasses. They looked at the display and they could pinch on the cube and move it and pull it outside of the display. And the suggestion I made is like when you remove the headset, ideally the cube is back. And what's interesting is you can have a 3D view for somebody who is outside of the display or the headset rather, for whatever reason. Maybe they don't have a headset, maybe they don't want to have a headset, etc., but they still have a sense of depth and perspective. And in here, what I hear is also maybe because I spent a bit of time those last few weeks with looking at dynamic land, which is a way to have a system with a video projector and a camera to do computer vision and have an interactive social system in place. So when I hear you say this, I can't help but think my video projector, the one I use in my living room, it fits in my backpack and I can hold it literally in front of like the wall of a building. I don't know if necessarily people would appreciate it. Like if you go to a museum, probably, well, it depends, I guess, on the museum. But I can imagine places like this where we have some kind of control of the space or agreement, and not everybody again wants the headset or even have one or can even use it. And if we're in this together, namely if we have a discussion, maybe we don't want it. So I'm wondering at which point we can use like a small enough video projector to have this kind of social interaction, but in a specific context.
I know that that's like Brett Victor, Dynamic Land, and all of that kind of thing. And also there was, what was the keynote speaker, Mark? ACM Hyper, some,
Well, Kathy
no, the
Marshall.
other one, Signer. What's his name, first name?
The VUB professor.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Fabian. So
Yeah.
all of these things are totally cool, but I mean, I'm sitting in a room now with very dark walls. A projector wouldn't work very well. And if you're going to have a projector, you have to have somewhere to put it, right? And if someone walks in front of it, that's an issue. So I don't mind having that as a analogy, so to speak. And if someone wants to do that, I have no problems with it. But mentally, for me, the benefit of a headset is you put it on and everything is there, every surface is available. So maybe I'm just doing a shortcut, because what you're talking about in specific situations, like in meeting rooms or classrooms, to have all the walls be displays, that's cool, but you got to have somewhere to hang your coat. You got to have windows. You got to have storage. So the promise of the AR is really you cover what you want. Fight, yes.
Yeah, and to fight for you on your side is one of the big, and it's something I tell people all the time, with like, oh, we don't want the headset and whatnot. It's like, yeah, but in the headset you have a 3D object, whereas if you project on the wall, you can have a kind of sense of perspective, but basically you cannot grab that 3D object. It is not there. You project on a wall, and if you have a single perspective, you can cheat a bit. But again, you cannot like use hand tracking on that object. It's going to be, yeah, it just doesn't. Well, I don't even conceptually see how it would be possible. But anyway, so yes, I get that, and there are a bunch of constraints in terms of, as you say, light and yeah, so many constraints. What I'm kind of arguing for this anyway is because I think if there is no bridge to onboard people, if there is no way to pull people in, and something that is both convincing because of the content itself and because it's social, like literally inviting people in, I'm a little bit worried that like it hasn't exploded so far, let's say, in terms of adoption. And I'm wondering if Dynamic Land or the Looking Glass or Folk.computer, which is an open source equivalent of Dynamic Land because it has its own set of design rules, let's say, that kind of is open but not really. So I'm wondering how much we can onboard people without a kind of I don't know, preview, a way to get them inside, let's say, because it's been a uphill battle, let's say, and not necessarily because people are irrational or anything. It's like if they don't see the value and they don't have a way to try it without a lot of things that are real constraints for them. Like, for example, we were mentioning the size of the font earlier. Might not sound like a big deal, but if they can't read, it's like literally blocking. So I'm wondering if how let's say a window, again, I don't know how, it's just naive suggestion, but I've been pondering this more and more, having a bridge to get people on board and
Just really, really briefly, the people who did the Vision demo, as in the Vision headset, were just ridiculously impressed with the quality of it. It's a very, very different thing. But I don't think anybody would want to wear it all day. But it just didn't seem like an issue. Everybody we presented, they wanted to try it, and nobody complained. But then it was 5 to 10 minute demos. They weren't sitting there for 2 hours with something heavy. Mr. Anderson.
I was sort of thinking on the questions that you sort of posted, but fun enough, it wraps around to what's just been discussed in terms of addressing, because I certainly think that, well, in case people haven't thought of it in those terms, you definitely need to keep what you're addressing and essentially where you're addressing as discrete parts of the metadata. It probably won't surprise people that one interesting thing that I did pick up at the Hypertext Conference was people were, the S word crops up a bit in relation to XR and basically skeuomorphism. So for people who've been trying to break out of skeuomorphic UIs and things, whilst they understand the idea of a memory palace, generally that's not what they want. They don't want to go around plastering information all over things. They actually want to be able to deal with the information itself and do things informationally that they can't easily do. Now, that doesn't run counter to all these other purposes. What it does say is, this is another case where one size does not fit all, and one would need to sort of go forward with caution, because essentially you have to write both these things. There is the very personal use, where putting things in a particular place have purpose, because we know the mess we create. The analogy someone gave, if you could see inside someone's brain, it would be a mess and it would not be nice to look at, yet it's perfectly cromulent to the person whose brain it is. I think that's a challenge in terms of sort of designing how one goes about the sort of some of the informational structures that need to lie behind this new medium, because it doesn't tear down as neatly as one might think. I don't think it's as simple in the sense as having, in a sense as you have at the moment on a 2D space. You have a file, you put it into an application, you get shown something. So because now we have even more information, I might want to view something that you're viewing on a wall in Poznan, but I might want to see it on my wall in Tokyo, or I might not want to see it on a wall at all. I might want to see it decomposed. And in a sense, the information structure needs to be able to ride all those horses, because, for instance, where something appears in my workspace may be relevant to another person, but may not, and therefore needs to be sufficiently abstracted in the structures so that if you just wanted to sort of look at the data object, the information, the text that I was dealing with, you wouldn't have to have all that other stuff with it if you didn't need it. I'm sure someone clever than me will figure that all out. Thanks.
Peter.
Okay, I was wondering, does anyone remember the old Moose systems where you had the @dig verb? And has anyone tried to carry that into VR? The idea was basically that you're in your little simulated textual VR, and you'd say @dig north, and that would be the equivalent of extending the room that you're in by 1 unit in the northward direction. You'd walk into that one, @dig north, @dig east would cause the east wall to recede by 1 unit. And it might be really interesting to play with that for constructing a memory palace in VR, so that you'd start off in the equivalent, basically a very small square room that's just big enough to fit you, and have you turn around and face whichever wall you want, and then maybe use a push gesture to cause the wall that you're pushing against to recede back by 1 unit, so that you could just sort of move around in the virtual space, may teleport into the next unit, push that wall, turn, push another wall out. And of course, because it's VR, we wouldn't even need to worry about spatial integrity constraints unless we wanted to, so that you could have a wall double around back into a different space, essentially overlaying areas onto one another, even though in reality, it would just be one space that you're rewalking around. So I just sort of wondering if anyone's played with that or seen any systems that do something along those lines.
That's very interesting. I'm sure Brandel has thoughts on that as well as what he was going to say, but I have to just really briefly say, I'm not interested in virtual navigation anymore. I'm much more interested in AR. I think Tim Apple was right. AR is the future, even if you overlay things, because you don't bump into things. And the whole joystick movement, I think, is very weird, but that's my current point of view. And I shouldn't be talking, Brandel should be, so I'm going to mute myself.
So I'm not familiar with the people's construction of spaces within virtual reality for any other reason than for sort of artistic presentation and creation at this point. Not that it's not a worthy subject, but something that I have a blind spot on. So I'm afraid I don't know much about how people create spaces in it, but it is interesting. I've often thought about the fact that there's a manifest difference between somebody modeling a building in a CAD sort of software and building it in Minecraft, because in Minecraft, to the best of my knowledge, everybody is always in first person. They're never seeing it from without. They may be constructing artifacts that tell them about it outside it, but they always are actually up against the coalface, as it were, as they're building it, and so they're always apprehending the details at that human scale. But what I wanted to talk about was the canonicality of location within the real world, and the way that it presents important analogs, but also important challenges to the canonicality of informational space. So we have URLs, in the real web, as it were, and they are where they are. So you don't control Microsoft.com, you don't control Apple.com. And so everybody kind of agrees what Apple.com is, but the benefit of computing is that you can control when and where and how you see Apple.com, and you don't control the British Museum, and that's all. Like the British Museum has total control over the British Museum and what's in it, depending, modulo whatever's happening in the politics of the day and what kind of reparations are owed. But so there's an interesting sort of challenge in how you allow people to mediate those spaces and say, well, I'm on my phone in the British Museum, so what do we do about what's where now? And I think the web is the least worst analog for that. People talk about applications a lot of the time, and then like it might be sort of just taken as a given within here, but it also may not, that like the web is the way that we have this brokering of information, and I mean philosophically rather than literally, like that's the place where we do that. That there's been this really fascinating notion of annotation layers that people have put over the web in various ways, annotate.ai and others prior to it. They haven't been wonderfully successful, but I also wonder if there are sort of activation energies that those things haven't gotten beyond. So if somebody made something easier, if the notion of a user agent, these are all Brandel's greatest hits, but like the idea of a user agent being some kind of mediating force that has the ability to make determinations about what it is that maybe you want to see by virtue of being at Microsoft.com, and to extend that to if you want to see Microsoft.com in the British Museum or wherever. So I think there are important political questions with regard to who gets to control space, who gets to control what is where, and ad blockers are sort of the central battleground of that, even aside from the fact that there is this very hard expectation of canonical representation under the control of the people who have it in meat space. That property, like people talk about property is 9/10 of the law, but then and there's been much made of things like virtual graffiti and how edgy it is. But like those are real concerns once they start becoming important enough that somebody really gets to see somebody really has a plausible chance of seeing these particular pieces of digital graffiti over things in the British Museum and the occasional exhibits that says like, no, this one's here for legitimate purposes. So yeah, I think the web is a really important place to see these things and understand the relationships, but also that the political basis on which we get to decide who's allowed to mediate what's where and what people see is at least as important as the technical. One of the main things that I wanted to come away from my screen with.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And importantly and relevantly, I was questioning the other day the meaning of life, in the sense of how I would try to talk to my son about it. And no, I'm not going on some weird little jaunts. But the meaning of life is not one thing. Yeah, 42. Peter, that's exactly right. That is what it is from one perspective. So the meaning of life can be likened to the meaning of a country. What is the meaning of America? What is the meaning of Britain, etc., right? It's an interesting question, because for somebody who defines their whole identity to that nation, it's their identity. So for some people who are at war with that nation, it's the enemy. Why am I bringing this up in the middle of this? That is because when we're talking about location, because Brandel is so genius for bringing it up and sparking these thoughts, what is politics? Politics is control in a large part of spaces, right? A nation is defined by its spaces, social spaces, economic spaces, geographical spaces, right? So now that we're looking at XR space, we really need to think about what space is. right? Is it the coordinates of stuff in it? Is it the meaning of the items in it? Is it who placed them there? Is it how it's being read? Is it when it was going to be presented? Is it the physical world that it exists in when it is projected? These are really important issues, and I think they're tractable because they all come down to the same thing, like countries or meaning of life, and that is it depends, right? So playing around a lot with the headset recently, especially Symposium and so on, we don't necessarily need to share every aspect of our XR experience with everyone else. But we do need to decide what should be shareable and how. And that may be completely adjacent to previous notions of what space is. We may have to completely, like Peter's been going on and on and on in a very good way about looking at space in completely different non-linear, non-Euclidean ways, what it means. So Chris, please go now, but maybe later we also return a bit to the whole space notion.
Yeah, of course, I've been in the decentralized camp for a while, so with the use of hashes and everything for addressing, as I've discussed way too many times. But so I'm definitely in the camp of tear down all the walls, so all annotations anywhere, all the time, but filtering, and that's where we don't really have any system of personal PKI and trust networking and such. I think we had that, a lot of these things would become much easier and sort of out of the box experiences that would be expected. Because obviously I can't have just everyone can say anything all the time without any, control filtering. So, and yeah, I don't want to censor either. So it's that weird balance.
Yeah, that is an important dimension to space now, that social space, and we see all kinds of craziness at the moment. But I mean, so a user case to draw from what we're doing for Sloan, not to make this a Sloan discussion, but let's say someone is in the Sloan environment doing the things, they got papers here, there, and everywhere, right? They now want to go out of that environment into something else, but they want to bring with them stuff. What are the kind of stuff they should be able to bring with them? Lists of papers, of course, that's an obvious one, but also their personal attributes, such as this one was really interesting, and this is one I have to remember. That's clearly something we want, like a pin or a favorite, because that can go into other libraries, like in my own reader library as an example. But what if they want to send a cluster of a couple of papers they had up here, which they decided is kind of similar? How can they select that and then share it with someone? Would it be shared as a list or as a constellation? These are very down-to-earth issues, and I think it's kind of incredible we're at the point where we can actually deal with that now. Concrete XR, it's become concrete in a sense, right? Come on, guys.
Yeah, well, so
there, that's amazing.
Absolutely. So I mean, the challenge is, so inside the application of the XR reader, obviously, the answer is whatever Andrew feels like implementing. And with consultation, obviously you're a benevolent autocrat in that regard. But I think that doesn't answer the broader question of what is the more open-ended mechanism by which people have the ability to reach those things. And so if this is boiled down to a URL, then that's a URL, and that answers some things, but not others in terms of discoverability. Like and it may end up still being application specific insofar as you have the way that XR Reader sort of surfaces. These are the URLs that are sort of public and visible to all, and these are the ones that are private. If you boil it down to a file that people have the ability to distribute, then that's an immediate mechanism that people have the ability to pass back and forth through some kind of messaging app, through email, through all of those other sort of reference points. There's not yet an intrinsically geospatial kind of representation of linking a thing to a space. again, Andrew has the ability to do that, modulo the difficulty of working how the hell to do that. But it is possible to get some kind of geolookup of an IP, kiss some trinkets of various kinds and hope that there's going to be enough consistency that you save this thing in the Sainsbury's and High Street, and somebody coming back to it will be able to see it there as well, based on the sort of likelihood of IPs or the geolookups and stuff. But the thing that I was trying to get back to with the web before was the idea that what we're, I think, in a not so long-term kind of way, looking to try to answer is beyond the scope of a given application, beyond the notion of a particular website's schema, the Wikipedia, even if that website be Wikipedia, which I do genuinely think is a very, very important and special thing that we should deal with separately and specially. But what are the ways that we think of information as being related to a space, and what can we do in order to make sure that there is this moderately open-ended thing? And I take your point, Chris, that cryptographic hashes solve some of the aspect of being able to kind of guarantee that this thing is what it is, but so does the URL. That something exists at Wikipedia is about as good a guarantee as the cryptographic hash, barring any sort of man-in-the-middle attacks and whatever on the integrity of the server. So I think it's more to do with the sort of the political brokering of discovery, and what are the underlying metaphors that we'd like enough that we would like to grow out into the basis of computing. We have files as a bedrock notion of what it is that a computer system comprises and has the ability to adjust and has the ability to output. What are these things at that fundamental level? And I think it's not so much about the implementation details for all of the importance that cryptographic hashing and blockchain and things like that have. It's what are the social conventions that we have the ability to kind of present to understand what they are. And I would argue that, hashing and blockchain stuff still has the discoverability and definitely the search problem of going well, how do you actually, is somebody going to manage a BSP tree, like a binary space partition that allows you to make sure that these things are localized? Because that's as important as, whether it's hashed or not. So they're deeply human kind of technologies, but they also need to be sort of adequately cross-cutting to be able to kind of identify what happens across a myriad different modalities and expectations of what things are. And that might sound like wanting to have my cake and eat it too, but I think it's an important level of detail to be looking at it from.
Absolutely. Briefly, I've just put up the videos here. I said 306, of course, I mean 360. So one of the things that I demonstrated that most of you know, I think is really relevant to this, and that is the whole thing of copy as a citation, because the copy includes the BibTeX. Now, as Mark said at the beginning of the call today, that's such a simple, clear use case, but it may be extensible, right? Because we're living in a world of LLMs. So if you have something being given somewhere, if it's parsable, it will be parsable, right? We're not living in things have to be hard-coded. So if we give something from one environment to another, as long as it has some kind of a description of what it is, chances are it can be used by the receiving environment. If there is a 3D model, maybe it doesn't have to give the whole 3D model, but maybe it gives the origin URL, for instance, or the variables. I don't know. Maybe I place too much faith in those things. Mark is going to tell us the dangers.
No, I'm not going to tell him. I'm going to reflect on something you just said, which was that I was reminded that one of the challenges, and it was really, you were mentioning something like BibTeX. One of the things that did get talked about in last week within people was the problem about effectively trying to sort of flush the sewers, as it were, flush out the bad information with the good. But most of it is corrupted at source by the originators of the data. Not deliberately, but a good case in point is BibTeX is not a standard. It's a loose sort of confection of notions used differently by different groups. Markdown's another good example. Everyone is certain that the flavor they're using is the real canonical truth, and this becomes problematic when we going back to the sort of thing that Brandel was raising about. Well, if we want to pretend like things actually have a sort of somewhere a ground truth underneath them, the systems have to be able to do that. And I understand the point you're making also about things like hashing. That works within a structured world where there is essentially no ambiguity. You work within the certainty of that structure working. But when I also reflect that, the vast amount of the world just doesn't understand the sort of, even you might say, the light touch technology we're talking about at the moment, that's really problematic too, because the first thing that breaks when you give your nicely structured thing to somebody who has no concept of such structure is it breaks, because they prod it and they turn it upside down and they prod it in the wrong place, and the result is not as we seek. So I do think I do come away thinking that one of the things I'll be working to in the next couple of months is if they'll entertain the notion of sort of working, for instance, with ACM as its closest to hand, in looking at the practicalities of making some of those sort of minting those source citations clearer and actually less liable to misinterpretation or corruption, as I think they are at the moment. It's not that anyone's set out to do something bad. It's just it turns out that what people thought was unambiguous turns out to not be so. But the more we wish to just move information around and move it across spaces and even into spaces that are entirely conceived and not real, which is when the joys of X are, then I think there will be the importance of this sort of provenance chain. That's perhaps putting it too strongly, because that has a sort of moral element into it in trust, but just essentially knowing that what you got is what you asked for, and separately that what you got arrived in the form understandable in the place where you wanted to put it, which might not have been where it was created. So there's some interesting implicit transforms in that the querying and the transport layer needs to be able to cope with.
Yeah, absolutely important considerations.
One of the things, so TPAC, W3C TPAC is not this week, but next. So I will be out, so my apologies. But two, I will be presenting model, and I believe I have full approval. I have put a pull request in for I think I might have shared the model explainer. I don't know if you guys all saw it, but it's a thing of beauty. I'll take a break from my normal humility to say it's one of the most wonderful pieces of communications I've ever made. So if you're awestruck by it, then I don't blame you. But one of the things that it sort of underscores to me is maybe I should show it at some point in order to. It's really good.
That would be useful. That's just what I typed on the sidebar here. If you could at least explain more what it is, that would be really appreciated.
Well, do you want me to take a detour from what I was going to say to actually just show it then? I can do that. Let's see. Okay. Oh, sure. This, I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but it is also saying these things out loud. So I scroll. It says, this is the HTML model element. And you scroll. Do you hear that? The first spatial HTML element? You did?
No, we can't hear a sound, but we can hear you and we can see it.
Okay, great. So I'll mute it so I don't hear it myself. So it says the first spatial HTML element. It appears as a 3D object in a portal. The other thing about this is that you can also sort of rotate it at any time, but it's not visible behind the window. The portal background color may be changed, and the environment map updated to match an auto-fit parameter uses the model bounds.
Brandel, is it legal to ask you what environment we're viewing this in? What is this room? What is the everything?
This is just a royalty-free thing from HDR Polyhaven. It's a website that stores high dynamic range image based lights. And then I've made this prototype in Three.js. It actually works in WebXR as well, so you can look at it in Vision Pro or presumably in Quest. I haven't looked. I think it would tax the system somewhat because I've heard on expressiveness rather than efficiency. So there are a lot of things happening per frame that probably shouldn't. But yeah. But otherwise it's just using Three.js, Troika text, all of the greatest hits. So set back so it resides in the portal. If the free orbit mode is enabled, the bounding model is fit to the bounding sphere so that it remains in view regardless of the orientation. So here it's rotating, and you can see the bounding sphere is indicative of the sort of the scale of it. What I didn't do is show that it needs to be in that square rather than here, because the aspect ratio of this is more horizontal. Then it fits maximally into that. And I should make it so that you can control those things by clicking and dragging on them in this moment in order to be able to see it. Anyway, yeah, so and same here to be able to kind of ensure that. So that would be great. Regardless of the orientation, it's also set back by the full sphere radius. On platforms with a dynamic window scale, you can see these units here. So it's now 1.1 meter away and 1 meter large, but it's further away and larger, but which do not report the true window scale. The scale is set relative to the pixel size of the window, so it's remaining the same number of pixels, but and so then the view of the thing remains the same size. The teapot is getting larger. On a supported platform, the model may be extracted from the portal, no longer clipped to its dimensions, and should be lit according to its environment. So even though I had it lit according to that custom image-based light in here, once it's out in the world, it needs to be lit by that world. If the model has an animation, then it can be played, paused, and seeked. The model bounds are not updated. And that's as far as I've gotten. So maybe I should add a little bit more, but this is what the HTML model element is going to be there to do. It's one of the most important parts. And for better or worse, the little guy is now stuck on this loop. It's going to be a spatial element in that it sort of it is stereoscopically visible. It's something that represents an object rather than a picture of an object. And that's it actually meant that I had to talk about Magritte's betrayal of images to a coworker in order to try to discuss the merits and the importance of understanding the difference between them, which was a lot of fun. But thank you for indulging me. I hope that it's exciting. It might not seem actually as pretty or as important, but it does, I think, the job that it's supposed to in a way that makes me very happy for myself. But what I wanted to say about it is that I think a lot about what the web comprises has to do with the primitives that it's made out of and the primitives that are ready to hand. So, we have images and we use images. We have videos and we use videos. And it's actually kind of to me, that sort of makes it sort of a play for TempL's Web3 or Web 3.0 of actual microformats, and making sure that we understand that there's a really clear functional outcome of geotagging web pages or representing places or times or pieces of information about how we want these things to be kind of structured and ordered and other things like that. Because one of the challenges is that is really worthless formats, worthless information for a lot of people to layer into a web page when they don't believe that there is a significant upside to it. So, theoretically, Apple made some proposal of model in 2020 even. We've been talking about this and we're just getting around to sort of implementing and prototyping. That is not in model, that is in WebGL. But just getting around to enough stuff that it might be able to be worth somebody's while. And so we have been able to geotag, but unless people can see what geotagging does, unless people can understand what keywords do, to the structuring of a page. And search engine optimization is kind of one aspect of that, but there's still a degree of remove. Individual authors don't necessarily get the benefit of it. They don't necessarily even get to see what happens when you do it. So if you start putting lat longs on pages and seeing what those lat longs mean, then that might have a different impact on what it is that authoring is and what people understand to be site maps or page designs that we could kind of leverage. And I hope that model will be an indicator of what kinds of things. Like model is still not a geo lookup or a lat long, but you at least would have the ability to kind of present some aspect of information in a sort of a spatially true way by leveraging things like model. And I think that the primitives and how well they're presented within the context of the web matter a great deal insofar as it gives people tools that are ready to hand, so to speak, about what you are going to use to design a thing. I think similar things are important and inadequately kind of presented and surfaced within the fact that like iOS and Safari, modern phones, 10 and up, you actually have control over the theme color as well as the stuff at the bottom of the page, and those are two independent colors, and they're important decisions to make in the context of authoring and authorship that a lot of people leave on the table because they don't know that they are choices that they do make. And the more obvious we can make those choices and the more clear we can make their relationship to the information as well the sort of the mediating environment in which that information is sort of sourced, the better. That's all.
Thank you for that. As a reminder, we have obviously seen part of that before. And for the audio part of the recording, just looking here at Brandel and Andrew sidebar. Andrew, absolutely nothing gets done in this project without you, but no, you do not arbitrarily just run away and do something. But thank goodness you will speak up when you think something should be done or done different. So I'm extremely grateful for your perspective. And not to change topic, but one of the things that people really appreciate when I stick the headset on their faces is the Super Bowl. The 4 minutes of Super Bowl 180 in stereo makes people go wow quite loudly. And I think that as we are talking about things, I'm not saying we should recreate real world stuff for the kind of work we're doing here, but even having a stereo representation that is, side to side, it's absolutely crazy powerful. So I hope we can also look at that. And Brandel, that relates very much to what you showed. So yeah, I just wanted to put those two things together in a different kind of stereo. Mark.
Really enjoyed. I know you showed some of it before, but it's nice to have it recontextualized. I'm going to say something that's going to sound remarkably flippant, but it is with it isn't quite from that purpose, which is, as you were showing it, I was thinking of the person sat at the back of the room who was saying, "But that's for teapots. How does it work for coffee pots?" So there's a level of description that, of course, you don't need in the room you're going to present it because everyone knows that. But I mean, I think this flops out to my sense of the number of people who actually understand it. I don't, as ever, it never invalidates the idea. The hardest part is doing almost that top level thing of saying no. Not only does it work for coffee pots, it also works for tractors and dogs. And people. That's probably the point at which they blows their mind because they sort of don't understand the other stuff. But it all has to be done, and as you rightly thought about and showed, that there's a lot of thought goes underneath. And I was just thinking, as you mentioned the point about well, if you put in things like Latin long and then you start to use it, do you discover something? That's interesting because it was sort of part of the points raised at the end of the Blue Sky paper I just did, which was delightfully recast as a provocation. So it was my first time at Hypertext Fight Club, but I survived. I'll put the paper in the side for people in a moment. There was one of the reviewers commented it was somewhat dense and remorseless, but there's a lot to pack. I thought I was writing a small idea, and then I found I only had 6 pages to describe a large idea. But one of the things at the end really was saying that a problem is that a lot of tools we have for writing are actually still mired effectively in the pen and paper age. They're a digital representation of writing on paper. And to do the sort of enrichment, as for instance your example shows, of putting this extra information, means that somehow, and I don't pretend for a moment that I know the answer. I mean, I think many people will have to feed into this, is how we produce tools that can capture appropriately that information for the greater bundle of people who aren't thinking massively in the abstract and don't want to be shown, you know, columns of figures and stuff, but somehow have a system that sort of allows them to understand that they might want to add this information, and not by just doing it through an AI. I mean, I'm sure there will be clever things underneath, but I think to just shout AI too early is to intellectually is to just give up on thinking. And I do think it's something we need to think about. Anyway, I'll stick the paper on the side. No, and thanks for showing us that.
Just to be a little bit annoying and provocative, I hope more provocative than annoying, but it's actually not obvious that it works for the coffee machine. Not because it technically can't, but like I find a lot of my struggles have been with people who like just, I don't care, etc. 3D sucks, whatever. Fair. But a lot of people are like, they want to get excited, but they don't have a good 3D model. Okay, not of a coffee machine or of a teapot, but of whatever they're working on. So that's been quite difficult for me. That okay, they get it, they get excited, and then I'm like, okay, do you have like basically nearly anything of what you're working on? Like even like a low resolution model of the building you're working on, because we can start with that. We can start to I don't know, like fire drill or whatnot. People see that teapot and they're like, yes, okay, and then the next step is a little bit tricky. It's just like I don't honestly have. It's not a criticism. It's just a bit of a struggle I tend to have quite often, and also because in such situation I try to share, and maybe I'm wrong about it, but I try to tell people like it doesn't have to be photorealistic. It doesn't have to be like centimeter accurate in order to be useful. Even if you have something that represents what you're working on, even though again it might not be pretty at first, you can still get value from it. But I think when they also see beautiful demo or state-of-the-art presentation, let's say an Unreal Engine video of whatever people making the engine with the best artists and technical artists can do, and then they see like a blob with a cube, they're like, this is kind of not what you sold us, kind of. So yeah, just wanted to say that the coffee machine is not so easy to get from the teapot, from my experience.
So
I totally agree.
Staying within still, I'm going to show something that looks completely different. It's a new build that I got of my software, because you know I love to show my software to you guys. So I go in here, this is a Markdown demo. I copy Markdown. Now I go to author. You can see, right? Just give some space, and here, if I now just paste, it'll paste it as Markdown, right? But if I do this, I do paste as, paste Markdown, not paste as, but paste Markdown, it'll render it on pasting, right? If I choose to paste it as Markdown, as in just keep it as Markdown, it does this. It puts it in gray because it's kind of code, which is also how, if I paste in LaTeX, it puts it in that so it knows to keep it on export. You see it says using HTML tag / and then one more thing, and that is paste time and location. It only has the time, doesn't know my location. The reason I'm showing you is the act of pasting, of putting something in, can be transformative, or it can be recording. So as a joke, maybe, I was thinking when you were talking is, Brandel, imagine what you have built there. If there was a way we could paste that as Markdown, it would probably be quite verbose, or as LaTeX, or whatever. And here's the thing, as you know with me, data and metadata, I don't give a flying monkey what it is, as long as it says what it is. So I'm wondering if we can think of that approach as the act of when you get something, how you choose to put it into your system helps determine how your system deals with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, the goal of it is that that was not, but what it will be one day is just a pretty simple piece of HTML, where it's a model, a teapot, dot whatever, and one of the other things that could serve that purpose is to have scroll-based animations that are declaratively defined within CSS, those kinds of things. I mean, it's already veering into a place where it's no longer simple enough to be able to kind of serve that role, but it's a possibility that people may come up with a view to merging the concept of markdown with scroll-based animations in a way that allows them to be able to kind of mediate these things. Apple.com, for its part, is built in this declaratively managed scroll-based animation system that is, fairly painstakingly made, as all Apple things are. But it served us well, and if there is a simpler analog that serves more people's needs better, then that could be envisionable. It would be an interesting thing for Markdown itself to, or something as expressively simple as Markdown to sort of anticipate itself accommodating, because Markdown at this page, to Mark's Anderson's paper, understands itself to be in service of the construction of a static and invariant page, temporally invariant page, and scroll-based animations of the kind that I have in that thing are different to that, insofar as there's an expectation that there's something that is visually changing. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting barrier to break, and I'm looking forward to what people understand to be the sort of the philosophical function of animation in that regard, and I think it'll be a very, very important change to what sort of underlying web technologies are understood to be there to do.
I think we're going to have to.
I also have to go at 9:30.
Okay, we're going to have to think about this and bring it up many times until at least I get it. Fabian, but just really, really briefly, I saw in Mark's paper you cited Eugene Eric Kim's purple numbers. I made those numbers live for Doug, and I want to tell you why, because it's very relevant. Purple numbers are numbers at the end of a paragraph, so for addressability to that paragraph. All I did on the web version, we put in a system whereby those purple numbers became linked to anchors that were at the very same location. So if you copy them as addresses, it would jump to them. It's just an example of how you can twist things back on themselves to make them more interactive, even though it's just a string of text. Fabian, please go.
Yeah, to me also one thing where models themselves can be interesting, and just as models, like nothing programmatic or interactive, is to understand the world around us. I don't think I've done the propaganda bit on this channel, and a lot of you, I guess, even know this, like the way things work. And why do I mention it? Is because, and there is probably a coffee machine in there. There is definitely a VR headset in there. There is a bunch of stuff. It's black. Yeah, now we can see. I think it's a beautiful book. And I'm looking for a way that is more explicit, but anyway, just like camera. One of the two main points for me about this book is it takes things from everyday life, like a camera, like maybe not a 3D printer, a 2D printer at least, e-ink, whatnot, but also even just like a lever. Things really, it goes from the basics. And what I find really nice is, again, there are a lot of slice through things where you look at an object and it's not a black box. Like a toaster is not a black box because you slice through. And by doing this, you see not layers and whatnot, you see the functional parts and how they are linked together for a purpose. Like it's not random design. It's not designed to be pretty. It's designed to do a thing, to do an action and have an impact in the world. So again, for the book itself, I recommend it. But I can't help but when I hear Brandel describe model and also discussing about Wikipedia, to me, I want an AR version of this where I take the toaster, I look at it, I see the different parts of it, and I can explode the model to have the different parts, not just unlinked, but still when you push a part, it moves the other. And also when I'm bored with the toaster, or when I hopefully get it, then it's like, what is electricity? Okay, there is electricity flowing through that toaster, but how does electricity again works? And why I say this with Wikipedia is, and the hypermedia is, I go through a link. Now that I've drilled down on the toaster itself, I go through electricity. Once I'm bored with electricity, I go with physics and etc. And the world around me there becomes not like an abstract version of Wikipedia, but a set of interconnected models through which I can learn from, and eventually not just learn from, is like, whoa, cool, I learned something, but like, oh, either my toaster is broken, or shame on me, my toaster is not IoT. I can't even know when my toasts are done. I need a notification for this on my watch. How do I do this? And now that I have the knowledge for it, I can actually do it, design it, and improve. So yeah, that's the kind of interconnected model I want to get behind. I want to experience with, without glasses, with AR or whatever. But yeah.
So what I would like to do is that we put a tent peg in the ground on this and build from this. Let's say that what we want to do for the next year and a half, because this is just putting together what people have already said, that you can build in the space in front of you a 3D model of an engine, let's say, where you see things happening, and it happens to be knowledge. You know, you're showing a knowledge thing. It's basically a graph, but very richly visual, animated. That should be our goal, right? Whether it's for academia or whether it's for poetry, a sculpture, because there's so many ways to have XR, obviously. We currently, with Sloan, have you sitting in a ball, which is fantastic for that. We haven't focused on a 3D sculpture you walk around, which I think we should really look at. And then there's AR and all of these things. What do you feel? Should we take this Fabienne provocation quite literally?
So that's one of the things that I'm fairly acutely aware of with the level of competence that I have, which is at a level but not beyond it. In 3D authoring, I can make stuff, but I'm not a full-fledged professional class 3D author, like 3D artist of the kind that would work at Industrial Light and Magic. I'm acutely aware of the floor below which 3D stuff looks like garbage. One of my highest priorities in my career, frankly, is going to be the authoring of spatially meaningful information in such a way as it's possible to make it and have it not suck. I don't see a solution until model is sort of 3 or 4 years in. The HTML model element is something that I need to get in and put to bed, and then I would start on authoring. So yes, I don't think that it's worth my trying to pick it up right now. But that's not to say that's from an actual bare bones like web standard. Like, what is Safari going to do? What am I going to lean on Chrome to do? Which is perhaps a different thing to what you all in this room are sort of anticipating as your function within that. So, so I'm a not yet, but that's not because it's not a good idea, but because it is.
So I think we have to be incredibly ambitious in our dialogue and also in what we try to build. So I hear you, Brandel. I also think that we need to at least invent these things on pen and paper. I could imagine having a big room like what we have with Andrew. Most of you know there's a ball on your arm where your watch would be, which represents a library, which you can kind of shrink things down. Imagine if you can shrink it down, but then take that library at a like Andrea scale in front of you. So you may be inside it, but it's also a thing now dimensionally. And if we do what with Brandel's teacups, that's funny. Our neighbors right here, they are teapot designers, quite famous actually. So that's amusing. Anyway, we got to start thinking about how these things go from A to B. And I honestly think that the technical description of what a thing is from here to there can be simplified. One drunken evening last week with Dave Millard, who was an absolute wise, informed genius, came up to be, what about if we, with an image, a JPEG, we have EXIF information, right? We have information about the photograph that was taken. What if we use the image itself as almost nothing, like a thumbnail, even the proper image? But we put all kinds of stuff in the EXIF, and we call it, instead of JPEG, we call it XPEG, right? I mean, as long as we start doing 1 or 2 spaces, we can move this stuff between. We can smuggle a lot of stuff, right? Smuggle meaning a fun, easy way that a user sees, oh, there's an image. It's like a very brief little basic thing. Who cares? Put on the XR headset and whatever's in. Suddenly it's like, this is an actual animated 3D model. I didn't know that because it's in the metadata. There's so many ways to do it. And I really think we should just do it and fail, do it and fail, do it and get embarrassed, do it again, do it and fail. That's what I think. And we are 4 minutes away from losing 2 of the premier members of the community.
I just thought I'd pop in something because it came up again last week. I suspect it's probably a thing people are comfortable with here, but there was a lot of talk about mixed reality. And as far as I can see it, mixed reality and AR are just the opposite, in a sense, polar opposites, but to the same end. So one is putting the real in the unreal, and one is putting the unreal in the real. So it's a perspective, but I only mention it. So for those who do come up against the term and are unfamiliar, that there are seemingly quite a lot of people, certainly in the games area, would seem, who are thinking about what we would generally call XR in the whole under the banner of mixed reality. So it's nothing that should be alien or frighten us, but it's a term that I haven't heard in the couple of years we've been doing this. So I'll just pop that in.
So on Wednesday, for those of us who are directly working on the Sloan thing, maybe Fabienne, you could think about how you want to be able to give stuff to Andrew World and take stuff from Andrew World. What are the things in your world that you think are worthwhile to be able to do that with, and we can just start testing a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah, that would be fun. And also, I would love to be able to stick it in a document in such a way that when the document gets ingested as a JSON thing or whatever it is, these things can be found. I think that could be quite amazing.
Oh, just a quick one before some people go. If you're ever in Poznan or passing near it, go to the Enigma Museum. It's really good.
And try the coffee, but not all the ice cream. It's actually a really lovely place. Really, really lovely place.
There is also, I think, Dragon, and then a vodka bar just for students, which I recommend you go, but maybe not too much. Or
now you tell
cautious
us.
about.
Now it's safe. By the way, honest question, not next year, but the year after that, if we have a Future of Text in Egypt, who will come? I'm talking to Ismail about the potential of hosting it there, and considering he's the founder of the Modern Library of Alexandria, I'm sure he'll have a good room for us.
It's somewhat too early to make a commitment for me, but that does sound difficult but intriguing.
I think you framed it well. Carl, thank you for your side. Sorry, please continue.
I was just saying, if it's well organized, I'll come.
If it's well organized, what are you talking about? You'd be organizing it, you silly man. Carl, thank you for the sidebar on Andrea from Nomena. Her work is brilliant, and we always try to have more dialogue with her. She did come to the Future of Text at the Linnaean Society, but yeah. But okay, maybe we just wrap now then. We're all, lots of things to do, and very grateful to be back. Very grateful to see you guys, especially Carl and Chris, because you haven't been here so much before, and you're here now, and that's really wonderful. You both have to write a paper for the book now, obviously an article. You're obligated. That's okay. And if you do have someone else you want to bring in, don't keep it a secret. So see you in a week, and we will continue with the general notion of what is where in XR. and similar, right? Cool.
Take care.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you for today. Bye.